We're on to our lemon still life. What I like about this particular one, based on the previous one, is that this one is a left-hand light source, so it's going to give us a little bit different perspective. But starting with the mid value and placing it as diagrammed, and I've prepped this with a mid value gray again. You could prep yours with a light brown. You could prep it with just the color of the canvas. That's fine too. I'm just a big fan of gray because I know that under the Genesis it's not going to have a reaction. Some of the colors, if you're working with the Genesis, the acrylic has a reaction when it's heated, and it can discolor the Genesis. The Genesis doesn't discolor, it's what's underneath discolors. So that's why I stick with this gray. I know it's going to be fine. So laying in the mid value using a fair amount of paint. Yellow is obviously a little bit trickier to work with than some of our other colors because it's just so inherently light. And so if you find that whatever your background color is, if you find that it's showing through, what you'll need to do then is just dry it or allow it to dry and give it another coat. It has to be dry before you do that. So there's my mid value using my tin filbert. You don't want to be too small, especially on a light color, applying a light color like this, because when you go to blend, you're going to pick some up if you use too small of a brush. So that's why I'm using a 10, which is a pretty good size. I'll switch to a smaller brush for smaller areas. So there is my medium and my light, and I hope that you noticed the blending that I did was kind of a rough type of blending so that we get the texture of the orange going. Now, in addition to this, this is a left-hand light source. The lemon, if you pushed it into a form, it is overall a sphere. And so I have a crescent of dark going up the right side, the side the opposite of the light. And again, blending in a rough manner, but no pressure, just not making it that ultra smooth that you can get with oils. So there is the light, medium, and the first dark. Now we want to come in with the low dark. Coming in with this low dark, and what the low dark does, it's the lowest in value, the darkest value, and it also has, for a brown, has quite a bit of warmth to it, and the reason for that is so that the fruit doesn't feel brown looking. So take a look at that low dark, and you can see that it's just a real golden color. And again, coming in and blending, just blending just enough to create a transition. And because this brush is pretty big for this space, what you can do is just use a portion of the brush. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to do this end over here. I'm going to scoot some of my paint down just a bit. So I'm going to switch to that smaller brush. Starting off, like I said, drop down to a 4 flat. You can use a filbert, but dropping in the light value. And I put in the light value because I just don't want to lose it. And then putting in the dark value. And then I'll connect the two up with the medium value. I'm going to create a slight division. And also, it probably wouldn't hurt to put a little bit of dark value right on this edge also. And I don't think it's diagrammed, but I think it warrants having just a little bit of dark there just to roll that back slightly. Probably if it's been cut, it's going to have, you know, that little bit of a depression to it. So there is the yellow part of our lemon, the rind section. Let's just jump right in and do the inside. The white section is warm white that has just a little bit of gray in it, just to give it a little bit more color. This, we just filled this in with one value, and then we'll get more dimension when it's dry by adding shadows in between. Now we can come in and fill in the little triangular shapes. And I think I'm going to add, while I have the medium value on my brush, just a little bit of a rind going back. But lay these in a streaky manner. I'm laying these in with medium. Now medium plus a little bit of dark coming over to this side, just to start the idea that it's going to be a little bit darker on the inside here. And then with some dark value we can put this back on. And I just based it in with the dark. Now adding again that stippling effect of some medium value. So that is that first stage on that lemon. This area to me looks a little gray, so I'm going to try to put some more paint on top, knowing that if it won't hold, I'll just plan on adding more when it's dry. Let's go ahead and move on to our knife. You can hardly see where the knife is because I've taped it off, and it may look as if I've taped over the lemon, but I haven't. I've just, there's tape almost on it, but really just laying on top of it. And on this knife, the blade itself, we're going to base that in with the mid value. And what will make it look shiny and metallic is glazing that we'll do later, and some reflected color and shines, of course. But it really is quite nice to just tape that off. Then one thing that I find kind of tricky with knives is keeping the blade straight. And I think, because I know that we're going to eventually have to make this back edge a little bit darker, I'm going to go ahead and make it just a little bit darker at this moment. Just a little bit of the dark value. Okay, I'm going to pull this off so that you can see that that tape was not on the lemon, because that lemon actually is still wet. But I'll take this tape off so that you can more easily determine what is going on with that handle. It'll also give me a chance to check that that blade is correct. And of course we'll be painting our background in, and so we get that opportunity to fix up anything that needs it. The underneath of the blade, and especially the right side, or pardon me, the handle, and especially the right side, is quite dark, relatively speaking. This is a high heat painting, meaning that most of the values are in the upper ranges. But as in any painting, it's the extreme darks that give it the pizzazz. So there is our dark. Medium value. Blending by having the brush half on one value, half on the other. And then finally, some light across the top. And I have dropped down to an 8. I'll blend that in, and it's just to show where the light is striking. And I just think tape's an amazing tool. So now we have this knife on, nice and straight, hardly any effort at all. There is a little tiny piece that connects this up. So I'm just going to lay in some dark value. A little smidge of medium in there just for form. I think that let's go ahead and do this front lemon. I'm thinking that it should be dry before we start the plate. So let's just do this front lemon really quick. What happens on this front lemon is, of course, we're going to switch back to our yellow scale. And that's what all this is about. So switching back to this yellow scale, and as you can see on your diagram, you're going to place dark value up at the top of this lemon. Progress to medium. And when you blend this, you'll be blending again with your brush half on one value and half on the other. So you'll be blending across. And then down at the bottom, light value. we're going to take and fill in the white section with the medium value from the knife. And there are lines that go across, but we're not going to worry about that until it is dry. This is fill in the blank, but you do want to scallop it a little bit so it gives you a chance to put in those sections. And now switching back to the yellow scale, placing in the light value. Moving down to the mid. The dark. And then finally, and it's getting pretty thin on this side because of the way it's turned. We're going to see more thickness and getting a little bit thinner on this side. So that'll be the low dark. I'm going to make the white section a little whiter in through there. All right, let's, you can dry if you wish, but let's go ahead and put in the plate. My biggest goal with this plate, besides of course just getting it in and painted, is keeping the elliptical shape correct. Now we could have painted the plate first, but what I like about not painting the plate first is that we were able to tape off our knife. Having a straight knife is a pretty big deal. So that's why I am willing to go through all of this to paint around the lemon, to paint around the knife. Now be sure that it appears as if it visually connects on the opposite side. So this line just continues on through. We will be putting a rim around the outside edge. So, and if you get a few little wobbles, that's no big deal. So medium, and now getting a little bit darker as we progress away from the side of the light. And this, even though it's a circle shape, it's not a sphere, it's actually just a flat plane. So the light strikes here and then gets gradually darker, moving away. Sometimes I think that people get confused and they think, well, it's round, so I'm going to paint it like a sphere. It's actually flat, so you have to paint it like a top of a cube. And now a little darker yet. And the value changes on this are not huge because it's a flat plane and it's being affected by the light almost uniformly. Making sure that looks like it curves around here. So there is the first part of our plate. Now we can come in, and it has like a little indentation to it. So I'm going to come in, and I have dark on my brush in the medium section, and I'm just following that outside edge exactly, just getting a little bit darker. And relatively crisp on one side, and then it gets blended in toward the center of the plate. Not doing anything with shadows, just trying to create the illusion that there's a little bit of a dip here. Because we don't have it sitting on a disc, we have it sitting on a plate that's dipping in a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side, but this time I put a little bit of black with my low dark and just following that outside edge. And again, I'm wiping my brush, and what you want to do is just blend it in toward the center of the plate, and a little bit of a blend here. Blending in. And there is our plate very first stage. Let's go ahead and add the decoration onto our handle. And what that is just, we just basically have yellow and gray. And so what we want to do is introduce a little bit of blue, just to add some interest. Plus, it's going to make our handle look shinier when we come back through and add our shines, if we have something on here that is of interest. So I'm coming in with blue plus some burnt umber and a little bit of white, and adding just a stroke work decoration. And you can add whatever kind of dull blue decoration that you might like. Maybe you have some pattern that you would like to replicate, but just don't let it get too elaborate. And plus, we're going to end up putting a real strong shine over the top of it anyway. So that's all that really needs to have that little bit of a shine, or pardon me, a decoration going across. It's going to help us with our shine. The next thing that we need to do is we need to put in our background. So if you care to take a moment and dry, go ahead, and then we're going to put in our background. To do this background is just very similar to the background that we did in the previous piece. We are going to be darkest behind the lightest area, and then get gradually lighter as we move over, because our light will hit over here, and then we'll also be quite light over here because the light is going to strike here, and then strike on that back wall. I'm just going to get you started on this because it's just really truly fill in the blank. Create the warm brown mixes. Easily covers gray, and kind of having gray underneath it is a nice thing, because then we have the complement underneath. So this is where the darker value will go. And then again, getting gradually lighter. It doesn't look much lighter. I'm going to clean out my brush a little bit. And then getting gradually lighter over in this section. And then the other light section will be just in through here. And every place else is pretty much just this dark gradating to medium, light, light. So go ahead and fill in this background, and then we need this dry, and then we'll be able to do all of that great second stage work. I'm just finishing up placing a thin blue rim all the way around the perimeter, and just use the same mix that you used to create the decoration on the knife. But now we can come in and start doing the detail work. One of the first things I'd like to do is add seeds in this slice. And initially they're going to look like they're just really sitting on top until we pull some division lines over. So just burn umber plus some raw sienna. I'm just rubbing them a little bit to knock them down. Then we need the stem on the back, and that's just based in with a dark green and then highlighted with a light green. Some other next stage work that needs to be done. There's a lot of reflected color onto the knife and onto the plate. I'm loading my brush with the medium value from the lemon. I'm going to put just some of that yellow underneath. Reflections are independent of the light source, and so these just, whether you have a right hand, left hand light source, doesn't matter. The reflections just go straight down. So there's the medium, and then shading it just a little bit with some of the dark. Again, we're not doing anything with cast shadows. This is strictly a reflection. We can add a little bit of yellow onto the knife. remember that shadows are, or pardon me, reflections are transparent, so be sure that all of the plate form, etc., glows from underneath. So that is what we need to do for this go round. I'm going to dry this one more time, and then we can do our final work. Just reinforcing, we did this a little bit way back during form development, but coming back and reinforcing the sections, just using warm white. There shouldn't be corners, there should not be points on those sections. That's just very unnatural. I don't think that you find too many points in nature, and in fruit and flowers, etc. Now coming in with the dark value and doing a little bit of a shade. And then coming in with, again with warm white, and adding just some streaks to make it look a little wet. While I have that warm white on my brush, we're not going to get this much lighter because it's already so inherently light, but we can come back in and stipple on just a few light areas, just in that original light area. But look what my brush is doing, just tapping up and down to create that texture of the peel. So whenever you add the shine to anything, think to yourself, what is the texture? And the texture on this lemon, of course, is just very pointed, little points, I guess. We can do the same to this little slice, a little bit of that pith, and then the lines coming across. And I purposely made one go across that seed just to push it down. Getting rid of any and all curves, reinforcing the white section if necessary. Coming in with the dark and doing a little bit of a shade. One thing that's great to add on fruit is a little bit of red to act as a turning color. And a turning color goes where the medium and the dark meet, and it can get a little muddy in that area, so that's why you come in with just a little bit of blush, just like ladies put blush on their cheeks to look youthful and fresh and alive. That's the same thing that we're doing. So I have just a smidgen of red on my brush, and hopefully you can see just that little bit of warmth. And it just goes in between the medium and the dark. a little bit on that outside edge to roll it back without getting too much darker. Well, let's add some shines to our knife. Starting off again with the warm white. That is where the light is striking this blade. I put down a thin film, and now going back with brighter, higher shine. Finding the edge of the knife. And then just putting some skim shines running across to show that it's just very, very shiny. Then we have shines that go across the front of the plate. The lightest, obviously, on this left side. And because light travels in a straight path, there's a little bit on this back side. And then we can't forget this little rim. A few little lights in there. And I think that is pretty good for our shines. Let's finish it off with some shadows. I have my brush sparsely loaded with black. And as we talked before, shadows fall opposite of the light source. So the majority of this shadow is going to be to the left. Shadows are transparent, so everything that we've done so far is dry so that we can just easily go on top. A little bit of a shadow on the inside. It really gives that knife a presence. We have the contact shadow running underneath, and then having these elevated shadows just definitely say that that knife is hanging off that plate. A little bit of a shadow on that slice, all of a sudden this has volume, whereas before it was just a bunch of disconnected items. We need just a little bit of a shadow that the plate is casting. It's a very shallow dish, so it's not going to cast much of a shadow beyond a contact shadow. We do have on this particular piece some water drops to add, but our next piece really does a lot with water drops, and so we'll save the water drop lesson until the next painting, and then you can add it to this one if you care to. So I think we have yet another one of our quote-unquote quick paintings finished. Let's move on to the next one, and we'll explore melon, water, and drops.